3.5 is all about those later colonies after our first three were set up. Those include Maryland, the areas of New England, which is Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Maine. Then there's the Carolinas. Then there's the area that was considered the middle colonies, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. And then finally Georgia at the bottom. So the first one is Maryland. In Maryland, Charles I, who at this time in 1632 is England is controlled by Charles I. So in 1632, he gives 10 million acres to the Calvert family. So that is all of Maryland, the northern part of the Chesapeake Bay. And it provided for anybody who's willing to come and settle in this area. Cecil Calvert comes up with the idea that he would give 100 acres of land to any adult who came to settle. So if it was a family, a married couple, they would get 200 acres. He wanted to establish a safe haven for Catholics within an area of the New World that was highly Protestant. All the property holders could vote, which at that time only men could be property owners. So all men who were property owners could vote. In 1640, more Protestants are arriving than Catholics, so more Anglicans so much in that area. But they do establish the Maryland Toleration Act in 1649, which gives religious toleration within Maryland. Any religious ideology can be worshipped within Maryland itself. Charles II will take away the proprietary colony that it is, because it was given to the Calvert family, and basically change it to a royal charter, making Maryland a location that is they have to report directly to the king. So it was a proprietary colony, and then it was turned into a royal charter. The next colonies are Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Maine. So Connecticut in 1636 was established by Reverend Thomas Hooker. He will leave Boston. He has issues within Boston itself, and so he's going to leave Boston, and he's going to set up his own colony, which will become Connecticut. He hated John Winthrop's iron grip on the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and so he wants a area that's more freedom of movement. In 1622, Fernando Gorges and John Mason are going to set up a colony, which eventually will split, and it will New Hampshire will go to Gorges in 1679, and Maine to Mason in 1691. Now, the area that is New Hampshire includes what is present-day Vermont. Vermont and New Hampshire were together, and they're going to split later. But New Hampshire goes to Gorges, and Maine goes to Mason. After all of this, there is a civil war within England in 1642 to 1658. So it's 16 years of fighting within England itself. And when this happens, there is this contention of who will rule England. In 1643, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, Plymouth, Connecticut, New Haven, all of these will be combined together into New England, the Confederation under what they call the Commonwealth. The colonies, they don't care. They're going to ignore it. England is so far removed from them, they don't tend to pay attention to what England wants them to. In 1650, Virginia and Maryland are also kind of doing their own thing, so they don't really listen to what England has to say either. The economy gets really, really bad. There is no king right now, so they're under this individual named Oliver Cromwell, 1649 to 1658. He's kind of going to rule like a military dictator. The economy gets really bad. In 1653, they declare war on the Dutch to push them out, and the English really try to get involved in the triangle trade as much as possible. And this is going to boost their economy. Once they get involved in the slave trade, there is a lot of money within the slave trade, and that helps out England get out of this depression that it's falling into. Oliver Cromwell rules with an iron fist, strict rules. In 1658, he's going to die, and instead of allowing his son to take over, they decide that they're going to go back to a monarchy, and they're going to place Charles II on the throne in 1660. So 1660 to 1685 is when he's going to rule. Charles restores the previous charters. Remember, Charles II is the one who reverts Maryland from a proprietary colony to a royal charter. So now Charles II is in rule of England, and so he wants to kind of get involved and see what he can do for the colonies that are there. One of the next colonies that's going to be established will be the Carolinas. They are set up as a proprietary colony as well. The northern section is settled in 1650. By 1669, Charleston will be established. It has a natural harbor, and Charleston becomes the #1 slave port in the Americas, in North America. When we become a country after the American Revolution, Charleston remains the #1 slave location until they are forced to end slavery at the end of the Civil War. In North Carolina in 1729, they're going to receive a royal charter. North Carolina and South Carolina are separated by a mountain range. It kind of cuts them in half. So those in the north were primarily poor farmers, runaway indentures from Virginia. And so the setup for them is very different than that of South Carolina. In 1677, North Carolina is going to ask to be separated, and they are allowed to. And South Carolina receives their royal charter in 1719. They are established using the South Atlantic system. So slavery becomes the #1 economic thing for South Carolina. Sugar, tobacco plantations start to pop up. Overcrowded island immigrants are going to come to South Carolina. 1708 to 1710, there is a lack of contact between the upper and lower parts, and that's why they're allowed to split into North and South Carolina. They're very, very different, the two areas themselves. So was an easy decision to let them split. The next colonies, we're going to talk about the middle colonies. So this is New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania. Between the Chesapeake and New England are these areas. So this is the area where the Dutch were. Initially controlled by the Dutch. Delaware was Swedish controlled. In 1682, they're going to give, William Penn was given Pennsylvania. We'll talk about Pennsylvania in a second. But Delaware will be just slightly broken off from Pennsylvania and start their own area because they were so different, because they were of Swedish descent. And so 1704, Delaware becomes its own colony. Now, New York, we know the Dutch held control of New York as the first major Dutch trading area. We talked about that. In 1665 to 1667, we have the Second Anglo-Dutch War, where the English are really trying to push the Dutch out. England surrounds them, basically takes over, kind of squeezes them until they can't handle it anymore, and the Dutch leave. 1667, England is the clear winner, and Charles II gives land to his brother, who is the Duke of York. And that's where New York comes from, because the Duke of York was control of it. New Jersey, it's the land between the Hudson and Delaware rivers. George Carteret and John Berkeley, both of those are individuals who come in to set up New Jersey themselves. 1676, it's divided into East and West Jersey. But Carteret sells his part to some investors, and in 1702, however, England decides, nope, you can't be separate, you're all one colony, and so they unite them again under a royal charter. They're really going to promote religious toleration in that area as well. The next location, Pennsylvania. And I've talked about Pennsylvania a couple times. 1681, they are given a charter. Charles II owes a huge amount of debt to William Penn. William Penn was instrumental in getting the monarchy back after the Commonwealth ended. And so to pay him back, he gives him all of Pennsylvania. William Penn wants to establish it as a colony for Quakers. He has this policy of religious freedom as well. He didn't really care. You behave yourself. But the Quaker idea, he wants to set up what he believed was a holy experiment. Uncompromising, controversial, fierce pacifist Quakers are. Everyone can experience the gospel of God. You don't have to go to church. So, and also the idea that people are essentially good. They're born good. They get corrupted over life, which is very, very much against that of what the Anglican or the Puritan idea was at the time. William Penn writes a document called the Frame of Government in 1681, talks about establishing freedom of religion, setting up civil liberties. Civil liberties are your just normal thing that you are, as a person, as a human being, you should have. A human being needs clean air to breathe. They need food to eat, and they need water to drink. Those are 3 basic civil liberties. You have the right to happiness. You have the right to freedom. You have the right to live your life as you see fit. Civil liberties. Also, the frame of government set up elected representation within Pennsylvania itself. And so the Quakers have a good relationship with the native population. The people of Pennsylvania are civil to each other. And so Pennsylvania becomes very, very liberal. They're very progressive in what they want to do. And so Pennsylvania is a place that attracts a certain amount of person. And so a lot of people with that ideology are going to go to Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania and New York become big areas for people who want to change things and make things the better for the colonies. The last colony I'm going to talk about is Georgia. Georgia is an idea by a man by the name of James Oglethorpe. He's an individual who has a great amount of wealth in England. And so he asked for a royal charter for Georgia in which he could set up a colony for refugees. So debtors, the poor, what he considered the miserable wretches. So these are individuals that are filling up poorhouses and have very little. There's no land to give them. And so he proposes that they set up a colony and they take all these people in the debtors' prisons to this new colony and let them set up. No slavery would be allowed in the beginning because these are people who are trying to establish themselves and do good. However, James Oglethorpe never took a poor person to Georgia at all. He is given the charter and he takes some very rich friends that he has and he takes them and he establishes Georgia that way. In 1754, with the expansion of slavery into the South, cotton and all that, slavery then is allowed in Georgia as they expand. And it will be turned into a royal charter. So, now what you're going to do is you're going to go and take your quiz. The quiz over the colonies, 10 questions. You have 4 days to do it.